I believe so much in various art forms, historic context, capacity to immerse oneself in another time period when teaching, performing, and immersing oneself in the composition that one plays on the piano, studies, records, perhaps writes about, researches, to inspire the student so that their own inner horizons exponentially expand, to connect dots between different art forms where they can find mirroring effects with the pieces which they are storytelling through their playing. Technique, yes. Understanding, analytically, yes. But putting together the awesome one single statement of sounds that brings together so many elements of sensorial facts. It triggers the imagination of different senses, atmospheric, mood setting, storytelling with a specific tone of the meaning that the sounds without lyrics or words produce on directly the psyche of the listener. It's a nourishment for the soul. It's nourishment for the imagination that needs to trigger the performances, tempo, phrasing, articulation, tempi, pedaling, various combined and layered individual factors, despite and the details, of course, of the notes themselves, between the editions that can be compared and the capacity to follow on the availability of a copy of a manuscript, the hints of the thoughts of the composer's ideas that come to mind when observing their own notation and writing. Of course, the notation is not the reflection of the music's flow. In a way, it's beautifully so, because it's organizing by slicing in equal, for at least most until the 20th century written classical music, squares or spaces of number of beats, bars that slice the musical phrase, the thought, the sentence, the statement, the orator's opinion, the element of eloquence, and the quality of a melodic line that spreads as a run-on sentence without or beyond the necessity of one or several climaxes to justify the organization of the arching of the phrase, regardless or regarding also actually the harmonic lightning, as if highlighting the melodic line, organizing the bass line, which very often reflects in a different emotional aspect the melodic line and the harmonic structure in the middle. Sometimes the melody is in the middle, rarely, but it happens beautifully so, like in the first Barcarolle by Fauré, for instance, out of my thoughts. But anyway, the point is that whatever the texture is, polyphonic, monophonic, melodic with accompaniment, or a simple two-voice invention style in terms of the structure of the texture, it doesn't have to be filled with elements. It has to be sometimes, like in a satie gymnopédie, completely ecstatic, and in a sense the musical action happens by the rhythmic tempo of the harmonic progressions, not only the tempo of the beats, but mostly their own flow. And the action happens in one's connection between the sounds, the quality of the legato, or the articulated air legato, or the quality of the downbeat, heavier posture, or an upbeat, provocative, louder than the downbeat accent if the playfulness asks for it, or the moodiness, or the way you bring to express different ambivalent feelings that you sense feel emerging from the texture, from the story telling of the composer's way of organizing the spaces of the sounds. It's not just, but it is, well, a, a obstacles course to play cleanly through all the sections and avoid the wrong notes, the wrong chords, and all the wrong things that can happen through by practicing to avoid them and putting them in the muscular memory. I don't say that it should be separated from the inspiration for the piece's performance, nor from the meaning of what the piece's performance is supposed to vehicle. Of course, the indication of the score, if it says allegro andante, gives us the idea of the lively, soulful, joyful, or sad. But those are very word indications that sort of reflect what the music itself, once played, is supposed to create. But it depends on how much you spice it through your own extra layer of expression over the expression of itself, or you just stay a little purposely away from over-involving your interpretational, emotional, or expressive element of driven involvement. And sometimes over-involvement, it almost overwhelms the piece with your own drive in it. It is a very subtle balance that the teacher is supposed to find for the student to search by themselves until they find the right mix in their own interpretation in turn. It is easy to say, difficult to do, long time to mature inside oneself. And that's why I was saying at the beginning, we need to constantly inspire ourselves from the art context in which this piece was created. Not that the composer actively, in the case of Mussorgsky's pictures, it is, but generally, no. It is perhaps just the infusion of the art forms of the composer's time period that ooze through the piece in a different way, not in a directly obvious form of expression that would be the exact reproduction of the painting in music, of the mood in music, of the sculpture in music, of a battlefield experience in music, of a sense of uplifting spiritually through religious feelings, or through just, yes, the necessity to symbolize through music the different elements of the soulful search, and the idea of finitude and how we deal with this. So, of course, it depends what you want to feel the music is supposed to be, or this very music, or this very piece, or this very section, or this very phrase, or this very line, or this very note that is chosen specifically in a spot compared to others. And it's not just there randomly. Is it part of a structure in terms of the construction of the form? Certainly, but there is the form and then there is the essence, and within the essence you have also the elements that are there to translate the inner world of the composer's imagination, that you don't need to be able to completely, let's say, unveil, because most of it remains mysterious. Why did the composer choose a certain tempo, a certain time signature, a certain indication of the tempo, and then did the composer really limit him or herself to only what came to them in order, if the inspired way to develop their notation, because inevitably the notation is meant to rigidify the flow of the inventivity, of the creativity, of the improvisatory emotional outburst that comes in the composer's thoughts. And then because of the written fact, and it is, they have to organize all this flow, and that organization of the flow brings them then to a certain organization, to the point to which the improvisatory inspirational flow of events that is to do with spontaneity disappears from the fact that the organized way of things overflows, and then the analytical process starts about the form and the development of a thematic material and its capacity to be imitated and organized and eventually brought into a fugue. And then you have a capacity of brainstorming of the music. When I was thinking earlier about this, I was thinking, the more I teach, the more I realize that if the student doesn't feel what the music means to them, and if anything or whatever, even different from what it means to me or it meant to me when I studied it, or when I play it, even now, then that's fine, because in fact, how can I make the student love the musicianship of it, or the musicality of it, or the imagination that it triggers in me as the teacher of it, or former student that I was, as well as present performer, and of course teacher, to translate the technique, how to handle it, how to memorize it, how to organize it, how to perform it reliably in terms of the technique that is without which there is no artistry. But then there must be and should be and is a line of driven organizational thoughts that come one after the other in the flow, in the order of the composer's way of developing the musical storytelling. You don't choose the order of the thematic materials or of the movements or of the way the composer develops or not, and how much or at all a theme or a melodic line or a leitmotif. In other words, you start as a performer with a written, completed piece, and you have to bring it alive as if you're re-entering in the creative moment of the composer's own yearning towards the next note, the next phrase, the next sentence, the next line, the next movement, the next statement. And beyond the experienced notational and organizational factor of all this way of living the music written, the way the music comes to life sometimes totally doesn't reflect the notation itself. Thankfully so, I might say, because when you have a melodic line in Chopin, for instance, which is so incredibly perfumed and flowered and sunset or sun risen or whatever nature organization, or you think about paintings of the Impressionists when you play Debussy, Fauré, and so all these imaginations come to mind because the music triggers them. But you have to focus on what to bring out and how to organize what you bring out in your studies. That's why the teacher has to bring you, as well as opening of the horizons, as well as focusing on the detail. And that is the challenge of organizing both in a way that it appears as it is, completely and totally devoted to be authentic to the composer's wish, while completely at the same time appearing to the listener as an inspired, spontaneous moment. And that's it's ambivalent but very important yearning towards. And therefore, when I think about the bar lines, which slice the thoughts of the composer's phrases, because of organizational necessity for the eyes to visualize the structures and the substructures and the little structures and see how things fit. Organizing all these note spaces, silences, rests, breathing, articulations, rhythmicities, different types of patterns, triplets, syncopations, 2 against 3. All these elements that are the ingredients, as you would say, for the cooking shows, the people have the right ingredients. The best ingredients is what makes the best cooking result. And I think the same thing is here. The composer chooses specifically the ingredients of this note there, of this pitch there, of this rhythm there, of this accompaniment this way, of this development of the rhythmic pattern of the harmonic progressions, or the rhythmic progressions going from 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 or 6 notes a beat, but within beats in bar lines. And finally, when you play it and people listen to it, they don't hear the bar lines, thank God. So in a way, you have to immerse yourself in the factual till the detail of each element is exactly placed correctly with the right fingering according to your own morphology, and how you can handle best ergonomically each section and organize it with a harmonic pedaling or melodic pedaling according to what you think or you feel or your teacher advises you, and how the tempo, the acoustics, the resonance, the response of the piano action all combined contribute to trigger how the piece comes from a dead scroll paper notation from whichever time period to today's universal usage of this music as a necessity to produce technical clarity and informed authenticity with organized good taste of knowledge of the stylistic element, with the analytical understanding as well as the learned effects of what the genre asks for: a concerto, a sonata, a trio, as an aria, a quartet, a transcription from orchestra, choir, or piano. Piano can play all the repertoire for it, as well as all the other repertoires. It all depends how you voice, how you layer the voicings, how you organize the structure. It's easy to play stuffy, it's easy to play blurry, it covers up this and that, but if you play less, and the complexity of a Scarlatti sonata compared to the complexity of a Scriabin sonata in terms of texture, to bring out with a necessary stylistic difference, but also textural element. It's all these elements which I feel as a teacher I need to help clarify the student to put all together. It's all about organizing the disciplined ways of then freeing after that discipline yourself to perform it as if you're improvising it, which you're not. But it is the way that you organize in between the notes, the breath, the here, the there, the element of a statement that is not indicated in the notation beyond the bar lines, and the organization of a group of sentences by group of bars and structures and substructures and hypermeters. yes, the conductor does that without to play. A pianist has to do all this and play, or while playing. And how do you trigger that? Curiosity, and how do you bring the student to get interested in historic events written about during the period when this composer was writing this piece, and how much do you feel that perhaps, or it did not always, but influence the expression of the elements that are in the piece. Stylistically, of course, historically especially, again, go to the museums and look at paintings of the time period and see how music was reflective of what the painters saw in the shadow and the light, the chiaroscuro, and they transform it in their piano writing through subtle ways, with pedal or with delayed organization of voice leading that brings richness of inner world that is in a shadow compared to melodic light, but everything is beautiful, everything is meaningful, but everything is layered with a certain way that you have to bring it alive, from the extra breathing that is not indicated in the rests, to the eloquence of the statements that corresponds to the style of type of art forms that you can see from the time period and that you can visit, that you can choose to search for. What did Dutch people in the 17th century paint? What did French people in the late 19th century paint? And what did photographers search for later in the 20th century to express? And how does the evolution of societal organization towards art form, from the sacred to the profane, and how music fits inside this with an expression of meaning, need, soulful food. And you can become then acquainted by your own curiosity to things that correspond and create links between art forms that don't exist in art books, that don't say this piece by music of this composer corresponds to this painting or this sculpture or this art film or this expression of photographers' coloristic or black and white expression, shadow, lights, colors, perspective, distance, elements of harmonic organization in the music, like in the space, architecture, especially architecture, not only for the form, but also for the style. When you play something of the Baroque or of the style galant or the modernity or the post-modernity with the post-tonal systems, and then you can look at the different situations of evolution of the formal expression of paintings, figurative or not figurative, and when not, all kinds of cubism and other forms that bring you to understand better music by Berg and beyond. It's easy to say in a flow of words here that things like this could, should, or need to happen in order to put together a certain inner world that will nourish your interpretation while you organize your precision of technique. And that is why I find that it's so essential for the student to reach a point in the learning of the piece where they perform it not only to be precise and organized and correct, but also to be inspired and therefore inspirational.